The Cincinnati Bengals got a deal done with one of their own, Jalen Davis, returning to the Cincinnati Bengals in 2026.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and the number one sports podcast network in the land. He's James Rapien, I'm Jake Liscow. We've had you covered here on Locked On Bengals since 2016, your best one-stop shop for all the news, everything going on with your Cincinnati Bengals, and a whole lot of analysis too. For your second show of the day, or maybe this is your first show of the day, your shorter form show. We're launching these 10-minute episodes here this week. Well, we're going to talk about an extension that a player himself broke on social media, and that is Jalen Davis returning for the Cincinnati Bengals, signs an extension, announces it himself, and the question eventually becomes, will he be a starter for the Bengals after coming off the practice squad in 2025 and playing quite well in that spell? But good for JD getting that additional time with the Bengals after coming off the practice squad in 25.
Yeah, it's good for JD, good for the Bengals. It's good in a bunch of ways. First things first, he's the type of guy that it's cool to see them get an opportunity. And when he was elevated from the practice squad last year, initially, it was like, oh, that's good. Jalen's getting some run. And then he was productive. And he was out there and you noticed him and he made plays and he had the interception and he had a couple tackles for loss and had some pass breakups and just, you noticed him. And we talked about in our other show with Cody about corners tackling, and he made some nice tackles despite being smaller in stature. And I think that kind of shows the type of player he is. There are a lot of players that wouldn't be able to do the back and forth from the practice squad to potentially playing to filling in for Mike Hilton a few years ago when Hilton got hurt and the Bengals were contenders, to getting cut and being on the practice squad and bouncing back and forth. And he did that, Jake, and had this success. And I don't think he'll mind me telling it now. I'll at least tell part of it. One thing last year when the Bengals were really going through it, and this was before Jalen was playing. They were going through it defensively. They were going through it from an adversity standpoint. Joe was hurt. They've lost some games. Things were kind of crumbling. It's probably around the Joe Flacco trade in that range, maybe a few weeks after the Flacco trade, and the defense was still struggling. Zach Taylor mentioned Jalen Davis as a leader. He was on the practice squad then. He wasn't playing then. But that's how dialed in and locked in and I think well-respected Jalen Davis is in this locker room. And so to keep him, it may seem like just like that's not Dalton Risner and that's not this, that's not that. Fine. But I do think it's important to keep guys like that around, especially when you have so many young guys in that locker room.
Yeah, these are the kinds of deals that happen at this time of year. This is something that I've talked about a lot on the podcast, right? Like the medium plus price veteran free agent deals or free agent to be deals very rarely happen before the combine. This one getting done before the combine probably speaks to the kind of deal it is at the time of us recording this. We don't know how big the deal is for Jalen Davis, how many years are attached to it or anything like that. If it's happening right now, it's probably a short-term deal. It's probably pretty close to the league minimum, but it's an NFL contract for a guy who is on a practice squad. So that represents a lot more money. And Jalen Davis did, of course, finish the season on the roster. He played from week 12 on, essentially, for the Bengals and played really well in a lot of those games and has been around this team going back to 2020, which is crazy to think about, that he's been around for virtually the entire Zach Taylor era, the entire Joe Burrow era. He's just turned 30 years old, which again feels crazy because we haven't seen a whole lot of him, right? Like there've been years where he's spent a lot of time on the practice squad. It feels like he's younger than he is, but had some really good games for this team. Like I said, played really well against the Patriots in week 12, against the Ravens in week 13, against the Dolphins when he had the interception, played pretty well against Buffalo in week 14 as well when he was put into the starting lineup, and has been compared to Mike Hilton along the way, right? And drawing those comparisons, that's a pretty high-end goal. Talking about corners tackling, like you said, like we talked about with Cody, not very many guys doing it at the level that Mike Hilton did it. And so if you can get that Mike Hilton style of player in Jalen Davis, the question becomes to me, James, is he your starting slot corner in 2026? Are you penciling him in on the depth chart now? Or is that still an area where you're looking to add a player, whether it's free agency or the draft, if you're the Cincinnati Bengals? We'll discuss coming up next. This episode of Locked On Bengals is sponsored by Indeed. When there's workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, and you have to hire that person for that job you have sitting open, that's a job for Indeed sponsored jobs that helps you find the people that actually fit what you are looking for: skills, experience, and location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your job posting. The stat that says it all is that in the minute that we are talking to you about Indeed sponsored jobs, companies like yours hired 27 people worldwide, 27 hires in just a minute. So if you're hiring, spend less time on searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of Locked On Bengals will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help you get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On Bengals. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, that's a job for Indeed sponsored jobs.
Hey, it's Matt Derry from the Locked On Lions podcast. The people I love depend on me. If I'm gone, the financial responsibilities don't disappear. I didn't want my family figuring things out during the hardest moment of their lives. That's why I knew only one place to go. I chose life insurance through my friends at Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You can get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. I love the folks at Ethos. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get the free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. That is ETHOS.com/LockedOnNFL. Ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Application times and rates may vary.
Today's show is also brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Welcome to the 5 Hour Energy flavor draft. We're looking at every aspect of the draft to tell you which tasty flavors are best and ones that might be sleepers. The board is set. The flavors are ready. 5 Hour Energy has a wide variety of flavors, something for everyone from cherry, grape, berry, strawberry, banana, Hawaiian breeze, sour apple. I'm a big sour guy. Tropical burst, peach mango, strawberry, watermelon. The point is there's a flavor for everyone with 5 Hour Energy. And I got to be honest, I'm partial to cherry. That being said, some of these newer flavors from confetti craze, fruity rainbow, cotton candy. Who doesn't like cotton candy? Find your new favorite flavor of 5 Hour Energy shots available online at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon.
James, is JD your starting slot corner in 2026? How comfortable would you be if that's the Bengals plan?
I think that, well, I would be comfortable, period. Two, I think that it sort of needs to be their plan. Like, clearly Josh Newton, they need him to take a step. I think finding another outside corner would be nice from a reserve standpoint, obviously losing Cam Taylor-Britt, but you have a guy in Dax who you know can do it if needed when called upon. I get it. He flourished in the boundary, but you know that he can kick in. Maybe you do end up with the Caleb Downs like we talked about with Cody. We'll keep referencing that. Our full show on Wednesday was with Cody. It was really good stuff from matchcorners.com. And that's it. Like, that's the dilemma if you're the Bengals, is like, do you want to find another nickel? Maybe if you find a nickel that you also trust playing outside in a pinch. But like a nickel only like Jalen, like I think there's only so much room for those. And so you're probably not calling Mike Hilton, for example, and bringing him back into the mix, or someone that's going to be a nickel only.
Yeah, maybe if you get a versatile piece, then, you know, there's a different answer there.
Yeah.
And we talked about that with Caleb Downs, right? Like, Caleb Downs can do some of that for you, and he can also play some deep safety for you. And that's that versatility. If they end up in a position where they go sign a top dollar safety that they feel really good about. There's a lot of safeties this year in free agency. If there's one position where there's a lot of guys, I think it's safety. Has every flavor and probably 8 guys that are pretty solid targets for the Bengals, depending on what they're looking for this guy to do. And then maybe they do end up drafting Caleb Johnson. But say that they add a couple of guys on the defensive front. Say they add a linebacker, they add a safety, they get to the draft, and maybe they draft one of these corners, Delane, McCoy. And you do that, and you kick Dax inside. That's a viable path forward too, where you could have these really dominant corners potentially that can cover really well, that can play a lot of man. And then, like we talked about with Cody, the tackling, I think Dax is a pretty solid tackler. He's not like, I don't think he's Mike Hilton. He's not a linebacker playing in the slot. He's not one of these, Kyle Hamilton types of guys in the slot. He's just not that big, but he's a good tackler, especially for his size. I think you can get by if that's your plan. So it does give the Bengals some paths forward and gives you the baseline level of Jalen Davis that has shown that he can play well in the defense that Al Golden wants to run. Again, like we talked about with Cody in the second half of the season, when Jalen Davis got in there, coincides with the change in direction schematically for the defense and the higher level of performance we saw after it was so dreadful to start the year.
Yeah. And so let's say they do draft a corner. Let's say they draft a corner 10th overall, right? Let's just say they do. What a perfect example to look at. It's a guy like Jalen Davis, day to day. I talked with Bengals cornerbacks coach Chuck Burks, exchanged a few messages with him after the Davis deal, the news broke. And he was like, that guy never complains. Never complains about anything. You know how easy it would be for Jalen Davis, who I know has a maybe toddler now. I think he might be like 2, but has a baby and has all these responsibilities and, is doing, like, it would be easy to complain about something. Never complains. Like, I complain to you, you complain to me, we complain. So I do think that element is big, because maybe his role does change. Maybe he doesn't start. Maybe he does get kicked down the pole again. And yet, if that does happen, he's going to be disappointed, take it in stride, handle it the right way, and be an example. And I think that's an important part of this. And I do think that the other thing, and you could guess where I heard it from based on what I just said, DJ Turner just had this whole transformation in year 3. I think Jalen Davis was certainly someone that led by example and kind of showed what could happen if you take things in stride. And so wouldn't be shocking at all if you hear DJ Turner down the line say, oh yeah, Jalen's a good friend, someone that I've looked up to and has helped me get to this point, whatever that is. Hopefully it's an extension conversation when we get there.
A good deal for the Bengals, most likely. We haven't seen the terms. We don't know those specifics, but nice to see Jalen Davis return. Good for him to get that veteran contract. And like we've discussed here, the leadership quality, I think, matters. The depth piece matters if that's what he turns into. It gives you options. It gives you a baseline there. We're not, throwing a parade or anything. No shade to Jalen here. That's not my intent here. We're celebrating the signing. There's more work to do, obviously, is my point here for this defense. But a nice little move for the Bengals in the middle of February before the combine to bring Jalen Davis back. And that's going to do it for this little episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Make sure you check out the full episode with Cody Alexander on the defense. And until next time, thanks for listening. Hoo day, and have a good one.